ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back. This is Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show, 77 WABC Radio, where we are making AM radio great again. Joining me now is Darren Beattie, the founder of Revolver.News. If you don't subscribe to Revolver.News, well, you don't know what you're missing. It could be one of the most important alternative news sites in the country, where you get not only breaking news, but some of the very best analysis that can be found anywhere on the internet. And joining me now, as I say, is Darren Beattie to talk about a truly groundbreaking article. The headline is Top Biden Intel Official Outed as Palestinian Activist Has Some Very Dark Associations. Darren Beattie, thank you for joining us on the Roger Stone Show.
Great to be with you. Thank you, Roger.
So let's try to set the table here. Let me just read the first couple graphs. Hamas's gruesome terrorist attack on the part of Israel's vaunted security establishment. This tragic attack has also encouraged some healthy critical reflection on the Biden regime's Middle East policy. In a colossal blunder worthy of the legendarily inaccurate financial commentator Jim Cramer, thought that was hysterical, by the way, Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, you remember him, he was among those pushing the fake Trump Russian bank narrative, as well as the 51 intelligence operatives who claimed that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation, said only 2 weeks ago that the Middle East is now quieter than it has been in 2 decades. What appears to be true more succinctly is that the Biden administration was actually infiltrated by a Hamas sympathizer who enjoys a senior role within Biden's national security apparatus. I would say that if everything reported in your seminal piece at Revolver.News is true, this could be the biggest spy scandal since Alger Hiss. Tell us about it.
Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, there's this individual, Mar Bitar, who enjoys a very senior role within Biden's national security apparatus. Now, he has a very interesting, and I think it's fair to say, scandalous history, much of which was unearthed at his appointment in 2021 and then just sort of died out and everyone forgot about it. But Bitar, as a graduate student, was involved in an organization called Students for Justice in Palestine. In fact, he was more than involved, was one of the executors. He had a leadership role in this organization, and this organization has regained notoriety in the media for essentially celebrating the recent Hamas attack on Israel. In fact, some of the chapters were, praising Hamas for the ingenious tactic of using paragliders and so forth, and various sub-chapters were celebrating it one way or another. So that just gives you a sense of the type of organization that he not only belonged to, but occupied a senior leadership role in. There's a picture of him wearing the keffiyeh and holding his fist up against the backdrop of a sign saying divest from Israeli apartheid. And of course, he goes from this to a variety of important roles in government, culminating in his role with Biden. But before Biden, he had a role in the State Department, of course, related to Mideast affairs. Then he enjoyed a role in the Obama administration, actually the portfolio of Israel and Palestine within Obama's National Security Council, which is amazing history that I just mentioned. Now, it's worth adding kind of side notes here that may actually be a side note because it gets to the network that is really more important than any individual. Among his colleagues in the Obama administration was an individual called Robert Malley that I imagine many of your listeners would be aware of. And if not, this guy, I mean, I would say Malley maybe more deserves the Alger Hiss comparison. This other guy is an up-and-coming version of it, but Malley is a more senior figure. And he's recently gained media attention for a very curious case. It's come to light that he had his security clearance revoked. He's the guy that Biden tasked essentially with re-engaging the Iran deal that Trump wisely discontinued. And just think of that for a moment. How bad does it have to be for the Biden administration? Now, Malley himself has a storied history. He's been through many administrations. He's from a very well-off and important family with ties to the FLN, which was the resistance movement in Algeria. He actually banned from France. His family was banned from France due to their sympathies for the FLN. And in one of these amazing connections that just shows how small the world is for treacherous scumbags, he was a plaque of current Secretary of State Anthony Blinken in France, the country that ultimately banned his family for their FLN sympathies. And there are all sorts of questions there. So again, this is sort of a side digression, but not really a side, because you had this guy, Mar, who had the Israel-Palestine portfolio in Obama, at the same time as you had Malley occupying a senior role in the administration related to the Iran deal. And as we know, it's like the Biden administration is pretty much an extension of Obama. This, reappeared under Biden, where until recently, Malley was in charge of Iran and Bitar got a promotion overseeing intelligence programs in the NSC. And of course, you go back to the records, Malley was over the moon when the news came out that Bitar was getting this top role under Biden. And he said, "Oh, this is my dear friend and colleague," and so forth. And so Malley is one association. Another association is he was a deputy for Samantha Power when Samantha Power was at the UN. Again, this was under Obama. Samantha Power had a lot of extremely controversial things to say about Israel, which she later backtracked in order to be politically palatable, but it's available online. She had a series of controversies related to that. So that's another questionable one. And finally, the one that I find the most interesting, because Revolver has done a great deal in bringing this individual's name to the national awareness. Bitar was actually, so you can just imagine how much damage he's doing in foreign policy, but the real prolific characters are able to do damage in both foreign and domestic. And apart from this decorated resume that I've described, Bitar was the counsel for Adam Schiff in the impeachment proceeding against Trump. And turns out he's very good friends with none other than Norm Eisen, another individual with a storied history of wreaking havoc on American interests both in the foreign and domestic policy domain. And Norm Eisen, in his book, he wrote a whole book about the first impeachment. Bitar appears all over the place in this book. Norm Eisen reveals that he too was a longtime friend of Bitar, and they're friends going all the way back tenure in State Department. So it's one thing to look at an individual with questionable beliefs and organizations and belonging to questionable organizations. But what you see here is a whole network of individuals, and Bitar is deeply connected with a whole host of these people. So it's very disturbing, not terribly surprising, but Biden's bungling of Mideast policy highlighted in recent weeks, I think, brings renewed attention to just what a disaster the personnel issue is with Biden.
In 1973, almost 50 years ago, 2 weekends ago, Israel was the victim of a surprise attack by the Egyptians and the Syrians, and somehow this escaped the attention of Israel's vaunted intelligence agencies. Israel was spared total annihilation when Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir appealed to President Richard Nixon for lethal aid, because indeed the Israelis were caught without ammunition, almost out of ammunition, with their backs to the sea. This seems to me, this most recent intelligence failure, if there really was one, seems to be the single greatest mistake since that 1973 episode. Do you think that people like Malley and Bitar play some role in the fact that the Biden administration is trying to kind of have it both ways here, insisting that they didn't know, yet there seems to be credible reports that the Egyptians, among others, let U.S. intelligence know that something was going to be afoot in Gaza?
Well, that's a great question, and it's possible to say one or another in relation to this specific event. I'm certainly comfortable saying in the grand scheme of policy, Malley is definitely an advocate of normalizing relations with Iran, bringing Iran back into the fold, and so forth. As to this specific, which really is inconceivable, because it's, people make comparisons to 9/11, and 9/11 was obviously an intelligence failure of some degree, but it's at least conceivable of how maybe they got a bunch of different sorts of warnings and chatter, but it really was kind of a different situation. Not to say that it shouldn't have been prevented, but the notion that Hamas would have such free reign for so long, given that it's like that meme, you have one job. I mean, Israel has a lot of jobs, but one of the main and obvious jobs that they've undertaken for a very long time is you have to keep that area secure. And it's not that difficult given their capacities. And so it's very hard to imagine how something like that could have happened. And, maybe U.S. officials, now were in a position to know. But, I think the more pressing question is, we're in the Israeli position. I mean, they rely on their contacts in Egypt, the same contacts for what's going on with Hamas. So it wouldn't be like these Egyptian contacts let the U.S. know and not Israel know, because Israel has a better relationship with them than we do, and we actually rely on them for that information more than they rely on us. So it's very strange. It's hard to explain, and there's all this attention to what a draconian response people want in order to for retribution and so forth, which is understandable. But I think a serious and sensible country would have to include as part of that a real reckoning as to who's responsible for this security failure, because it's really an unforgivable thing, and it's also, frankly, deeply embarrassing. So I would think that a serious country would make that a top priority, to figure out whose screw up this is, and I don't know, if not execute them, you need something here to say this is not acceptable.
PMS, pregnancy, menopause. Being a woman is a lot. Ollie supports you and yours with expert solutions for every age and life stage. They just launched 2 new products exclusively at Walmart. Period Hero combats bloat, mood swings, and more during PMS. And Balance Perimeno to support hormonal balance, mood, and metabolism during perimenopause. Grab yours at Ollie.com. Ollie! These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. 3 couples, 4 vacations, a lot to unpack. Watch The 4 Seasons, a new series starring comedy favorites Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, and more in a hilarious and heartfelt love letter to long-term relationships. Based on the original Alan Alda film. Watch The 4 Seasons, streaming now only on Netflix.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
5 immersive worlds, 1 amazing theme park. Get ready to explore the all-new Universal Epic Universe, featuring the wizarding world of Harry Potter, Ministry of Magic, Super Nintendo World, How to Train Your Dragon, Isle of Berk, and Dark Universe. Epic Universe opens May 22nd at Universal Orlando Resort. Our universe will never be the same. Tickets and packages on sale now at universalorlando.com.
In golf, precision is everything, on and off the course. PGA of America chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business for smooth operations and seamless transactions. Together, we enhance ticketing and concessions for better fan experiences from gate to green. This is pro-level efficiency. This is PGA of America with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Well, I think we can presume that there will be some post-event investigation, but much like the Saudis' role in 9/11, which has still not been completely and totally disclosed to the American people, we just have to take former CIA Director John Brennan's word for it that they didn't do anything wrong. I have a distinct feeling that we will never really know the answer to this question. It does seem surprising to me, given the Mossad's fame for their capabilities, that they would be caught by surprise like this. Your article mentions a woman, I'm going to mangle her name, Ariane Tabai, I guess it is. Can you tell me who she is and where she fits into all of this?
Yes. So this is sort of part of the side story in relation to Malley, the individual that I was talking about earlier. And, I mentioned Malley maybe is more deserving of this comparison because it came out that not only Malley, this was kind of developing my point earlier. You imagine in this environment, Malley, who had a senior trusted role with both Biden and Obama and comes from a favored family going all the way back, literal childhood friends with Blinken. And Blinken's also from a very favored family, incidentally, a very interesting family. So it's interesting, when you really kind of drill down on, these people who end up as fixtures in the State Department and these diplomatic roles and other things, there really is this whole different world that I think most Americans don't realize is just how much is based on, families and nepotism and, generations going all the way back. That's actually an interesting component of story of whatever, the quote unquote deep state is. you need to look at these sort of genealogical issues as well to really have an understanding of it. And a lot of it seems to kind of contradicts pretty forcefully a lot of the illusions we operate under in terms of, meritocracy and democracy and this sort of thing, which is an interesting and separate conversation. But there's no way someone of Malley's stature, given the current political environment, would have the security clearance revoked unless it's just inconceivably bad. I mean, he'd have to be, it would have to be Hunter Biden level stuff plus, but with Iranians, basically, in Iran with Iranian prostitutes. Like, I'm not really suggesting that, but it would have to be really bad because there's, this other lady in the DOD that you mentioned, again, very difficult to describe, but this is part of this Iranian influence network, could call it, collaborators, perhaps. And this individual didn't even have her clearance revoked, and she's clearly an agent of influence for Iran. And so the fact that Malley did is an enduring mystery. And I really hope the full story of that somehow comes to light of exactly what went on with him, what he's doing, what his status was. Because it took a lot of pressing to just find out, that he's on leave in the first place.
It is reported that he's currently under investigation by the FBI, but we really don't know much more than that. Folks, if you are just tuning in, this is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC, and we are talking with Darren Beattie, who is the founder of Revolver.news, about his groundbreaking story pertaining to the high probability that the Biden administration was infiltrated at the highest levels by pro-Palestinian activists. This is an extraordinary story. Let me ask you a bigger picture story here, Darren. It looks to me like we're headed to World War III. In other words, the people who told us that Donald Trump, if elected, would crash the economy and start World War III appear to me to be on the cusp of crashing the economy and starting World War III. These stories in the UK Daily Mail, the Post-Millennial, late last week, that 2,000 troops have already been selected for deployment to Israel. We know for a fact that there are already 3,000 quote-unquote contractors there working for the intelligence services. Now, we're assured that none of these American troops are going to see combat, but that's what they said at the beginning of the Vietnam War as well.
Right. Well, it's very troubling. I don't know if I go so far as to say World War III yet, but certainly it's a very volatile situation. To see the extent of escalation, and I imagine there's a lot of conversations going on behind the scenes to prevent that. It's, the fact that it's so hard really because for me, I talked to contacts and, multiple contacts in Israel, each of whom, is, very, very intelligent and very connected to the show and different things. Some are saying that, there's a question of how and why did Hamas even do this? What done this certain level of from Iran and Hezbollah. I've heard other accounts that say that Hamas kind of acted a little bit on their own, and Hezbollah and Iran are upset part of the negotiations going on behind the scenes. So it's really hard to say. I think it'll be premature to make any predictions until we see how the ground invasion goes in Gaza and what the response is to that. And I think that will determine a lot of the future course of things in terms of how many different parties get involved in.
All right. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank our guest, Darren Beattie, the founder of Revolver.news. If you don't subscribe to Revolver.news, I strongly recommend it to you. Darren, thank you so much for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show here at 77 WABC Radio.